Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Informing Choices mini-pod. The dynamics of recruiting are changing and changing fast. For tech-savvy recruiters, there's a whole gamut of options, from automated applicant tracking systems, video-based interview platforms, gamified skills assessments, to simulations of on-the-job scenarios using virtual reality, all of which take place in a remote environment. The COVID pandemic has accelerated remote working and is likely to leave behind a more decentralised hybrid working model. Overlay that with the post-pandemic economic scenarios, and we have an increasingly uncertain future environment. So in that context, what is the future of recruitment? To consider this question, I'm joined by human resources consultant, international job coach and mentor, Ron Mayne, to the podcast. Ron, welcome along. Tell us a little bit about your background and your work.
Thank you for having me, Steve. My background is in training and recruitment. And a few years ago, I've got asked for people, can you not just not recruit, can you help us get into these executive positions? I also have been developing this. I volunteer with the CIPD and another organisation helping young people into employment. So it's all about getting people into jobs, and some people along the way need that extra bit of help, and that's where I come in.
So what's your sense of how recruitment has changed over the last 12 to 18 months? You know, if we go back to pre-pandemic times, if we can remember when we were allowed out, what's kind of changed between then and now?
I think you have to realise what the employment market has gone to. We've had tens of thousands of people that have lost their jobs. Now, this is we know that in retail, there's several large retail chains that have closed. The travel and tourism, hospitality are sectors that have been majorly hit by this. And all the sort of ripples of the mill pond going out of all the associated industries have all lost people because of this. So therefore, there are a lot more unemployed people now than there were 18 months ago. Now that affects the job market because there are more people chasing those vacancies and there are less vacancies. So it becomes a very competitive environment at the moment. And as such, that's, in the technical term, is a loose labour market. Now, loose labour markets create certain circumstances such as employers cut salaries, cut perks, and people are prepared to put up with that rather than not having a job at all. So this is what's going on in the employed market, because employers are saying, well, if you don't want it, somebody else will. Now, this leads to obviously a poorer level of customer service because employees are not engaged. There is no engagement. It's just, I'm desperate to have this job.
Yeah.
On the recruitment side of things, in the UK, unlike America, we would never do video interviewing here. It would always be in person across a desk with somebody. You know, what brings you here today? And the answer is a train. What brings you here today? Zoom. A number of studies done by the CIPD, the organisation I'm a professional member of, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development, where are people being treated fairly on these video interviews? And this is a case of, we've seen many video interviews where someone's got a bookcase behind them. I've got a blank wall behind me here today. Now, if you've got, for example, you might have a damp patch in the wall. You might have the children's toys. You might have some ironing that can just be caught in camera because different platforms open a different wider angle view. So therefore, you are then being judged upon that. There's always that joke that people have got a perfect top half and they're wearing tracksuit bottoms and trainers underneath on Zoom. We can get away with that, but you can't get away with some of the things in your home. So therefore, there is that level of prejudice that can be seen because of people's home environment. So people need to be aware of this when they're doing video interviews. I think that there's always been a trend where people's CVs are actually not read by humans. They haven't been read by humans for a number of years now. They're read by keyword analysis programs from various suppliers that if you're looking for a job, say a project manager, you're looking for words like agile, project manager, experience, Gantt, charts, etc. When these CVs go through that, if you don't have those words, you may be the best project manager ever, but it won't select your CV. You won't make the cut. You won't get the interview. You will not get the job. So these are sort of some of the trends that are happening now in the last 12 to 18 months as far as recruitment's happening. So it's a changing and evolving world, as well as the employment situation.
Let's come back to that CV review, the kind of the automated review of CVs, because I think that's really interesting. And I also want to make sure that we touch base again on the kind of the social inclusion issue around jobs, because I think that's really interesting as well. But for now, how might firms change how they recruit as more of the work tasks are automated and the work that is allocated is going to be much more of a mix between human and some sort of automated system? So, how might that dynamic change in terms of recruiting, do you think?
I think that job roles change. History tells us this. We have machines that gather crops, combine harvesters, whereas 70 years ago, people were still using scythes and picking up the corn manually. So jobs will change, jobs will evolve, and jobs will no longer exist in certain areas, and they will exist in others. This is sort of how it works. There is the old adage that somebody said to their son or daughter, "Oh, what's a job that's foolproof?" A plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, because a plumber can earn £100,000 a year now.
Yeah.
So there are some jobs that are going to change, some that are going to evolve, and various technology is going to change that. It's inevitable. History tells us this. There are some jobs that are going to stay. So I think we need to be aware of what the future holds, what jobs are going to change, how they're going to change, and to start training the workforce now, either in upskilling of people in the current workforce or putting those schools into skills levels. The UK is making some boundaries in this with the programming levels in school, but other countries such as China and India are ahead of us on that, and we need to be competitive.
Yeah.
Because something else that's happening in the employment scale is outsourcing of IT and other projects to do with website. Today, so many people want a website, and if there are these platforms out there where you bid for somebody to write your website coding, and that may be in India, China, or somewhere like that, where salaries are much lower, and they're being able to earn a UK salary and still live in China or India, they're on a small fortune. They may have a huge upsurge in their living circumstances because of being able to do this, if you're looking at it as a worldwide platform. So I think we need to start looking as a country to take our stage by looking at the skill sets that are going to be needed and training our younger generations for this.
I think that's quite interesting. You mentioned there kind of the use of technology platforms. The existing platforms that we have now allows anyone from SMEs to big multinationals to look at a global talent base. And I think sometimes that's missed. I mean, one of the things that may be curious that you said there was about this way that jobs are changing. So what are your observations about the pace and scale of change to jobs? Because I think if we look historically, we've been able to reasonably well predict what's coming next. And I think one of the things the pandemic has shown us, or at least our responses to the pandemic, is that things can change much more quickly. Do you see that pace of change in the kind of jobs that people are being asked to do is going to continue at the rate that it is?
That's a difficult one, at the rate that it is. If you think in the last 18 months, we have throughout the world have dramatically increased our technological base with the use of platforms such as Zoom, Teams, Google, etc. Where 18 months ago, we had Skype as the main video tool for
Yeah.
video communication. Now we had a plethora of different platforms from different suppliers. This has caused video conferencing, where you would have a venue in a hotel or meeting center. You'd have 20 managers from different areas come and meet at that venue. That now can all be done in their home without transport, without food costs, without all the other add-on effects. Now that obviously shrinks that particular sector in the hospitality who run these meeting centers and rooms like that. And jobs are going out there. If you're actually looking, and as part of the role I have to do, I have to look at how jobs are trending and what people are looking for. There is a tremendous amount of contract work at the moment for various professional groups. This is fixed term contracts of 12 months. Now, whilst you're an employee of that company and you're paying tax, pension contributions, holiday within that 12-month period, at the end of that 12 months, you don't have a job unless that project is extended or unless they have another one. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the industry and employment at the moment because of this. And that's something that more uncertainty brings, that people are less likely to spend money because they don't know when the next paycheck's going to come after that period. We live in uncertain times at the moment. Technology has advanced us and we're working better, and I'll come to that a little bit later, but there's obviously that uncertainty. If you're talking about environments, I was discussing with a company director who has 2 floors of an office block in London for his business. And his business is still carrying on. Everyone is working at home. He's had to put a little bit more of the company's money into technology, and he has experienced a 15% drop in productivity. But that 15% drop in productivity compared with what he would be renting those offices is negligible. So I think we're going to see more people working from home and smaller offices, whereby you might have, for example, 100 employees, but only 75 desks or 50 desks. And a percentage of that workforce will work at home for 2 days, 3 days a week and come into the office only twice. And the ramifications are that you need less space, therefore less building of office blocks. And I remember a sort of a very clever guy said, look, these office blocks, they'll be converted into houses. So it helps with the housing crisis as well.
Yeah.
There's so many different options there, Steve.
Yeah, I would agree with that, with the outline that you put there, that maybe repurposing of real estate becomes something that's increasingly likely. So, we've spoken about the way that jobs are changing and the impact that technology has had on the actual work itself. So how might some of these evolving technologies, further advances in artificial intelligence and immersive tech like virtual and augmented reality, how might some of those change the recruiting process further?
I think the augmented reality, if you have a laptop as we're talking on now and a headset or even just a standard screen, you can put people into situations, and because they're in an immersive, either with a headset or just even with a screen or 2 screens situation, that they might act differently to how they would say they would act in a certain situation. I was helping someone recently and they were going through an interview process where they were given a set of questions which would be, to sort of intelligent people, you would follow these guidelines. They were talking about inappropriate behavior, breaking of GDPR regulations to do with people's personal information. Now, you would say, no, I wouldn't tell anyone somebody else's phone number. I wouldn't leave a file open on my desk that someone else could read. And you would say no, because that's common sense as a professional. You wouldn't do that in today's modern climate. However, if you're in an augmented reality, a virtual reality situation, there is that different thing that you may do that. And this will weed out potential risk factors if it's handled correctly. And you can predict behavior when someone is running through a scenario easier than you can a piece of paper, because when they're looking at a piece of paper, they can think, should I do that? Should I not do that?
Yeah.
And this gives, if it's handled correctly, a better understanding of your prospective candidate, because when you're hiring somebody, and I'm putting on my recruiter's hat, you need to get the best person. That person needs to work for you, do a good job, and be productive. That's what any employer wants. What happens is if you hire someone and they've done their induction and they get their first paycheck and they go off the rails on a drinking or drug binge, and then they don't come back, you've lost thousands of pounds. If you invest in the right tech and you can put those people in that situation where you might do a video temptation of something, like there may be, okay, what's your attitude to drugs at work? And then they'll let their guard slip.
Yeah.
And you think perhaps this could be a bad hire. And that's something how the augmented reality and AI would help in the recruitment process.
Interesting. I just wanted to circle back on something that we spoke about earlier on, was this kind of automated review of CVs and kind of a word search, if you like, for specific words and phrases. What I'm wondering now is that, if we believe that increasingly into the future, some of the softer, more human skills, the balance is going to change, and those are going to become perhaps more important than some of the technical skills, because we're always going to be able to go to a resource to give us the technical knowledge that we need. So do you imagine that AI will become sophisticated enough to switch the focus from technical capability of someone to their more human skills that many futurists would suggest that we need in the future?
You'd have to say, what is the technology going to be? If you look at, and I can give you a parallel in our current time or in a historical time, in the last sort of 3 to 5 years, where 5 years ago you had a massive upsurge in call centers being transferred to India. And the training of those people, because a lot of my background is in training, was that they would answer certain questions. Now, these are human beings, but they'd answer certain questions with a conditioned response. This proved not to work.
Right.
People became mistrustful, and a lot of the call centers in India and Bangladesh have closed down. So are people going to trust AI when they know it's a computer at the other end? If you get, there are sophisticated chatbots that are there for customer service issues on a number of platforms, and you use it and you hold on, you realize, I'm not talking to a human here, I'm talking to a chatbot. And you then get that level of anger. Is that level of anger going to come to AI? Can AI be as good as a human? Can AI have empathy like a human being, like you or I would, Steve? That's a question that we need to ask.
Interesting. I think that's a fascinating point to conclude. Ron, that's really, really interesting. And I think one of the things that I'm going to take from this conversation is this, both in terms of how work will change, but also how we recruit people and how that might change. We can see both how the new technologies can help, but also there's a danger there that the technologies could hinder in both how we work and how we recruit people. Ron, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. How can people contact you to learn more about what you do and your business?
You can look for me on LinkedIn. It's Ron Mayne, that's Mayne. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can email me via Your New Tomorrow, info@yournewtomorrow.eu, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you.
Ron, thanks again for your time. That's been really great. And thank you everyone for listening.